Welcome to Salty Church Online. We're so glad that you joined us today. I'm Miles.
And I'm Madison.
Hey, listen, we're going to go into a time of worship. We'll be here for about an hour today. We're going to sing some songs just to be reminded of truth and who God is and what He's done in our lives. Whether you know the songs or not, I'd invite you to sing with us and reflect. So let's do it.
How's everybody doing today? Let's stand together. It's great to have you here. Hands like this if you wouldn't mind. Let's sing this out together. Your word is a lamp unto my feet. And your way is the only way for me. It's a narrow road that leads to life, and I wanna be on it. It's a narrow road, but the mercy is wide, and it's good on your promise. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. Hey! You spoke, and the chaos fell in line. Well, I know, 'cause I've seen it in my life. It's a narrow road that leads to life, and I wanna be on it. Hey. It's a narrow road, and the tide is high, but you're finding the waters. I'll take you at your word. Hey. You said it, I believe it. I've seen how good
Where heaven's from creation, His pride and adoration, treasures woven by His love. His careful hands, they hold us safe within His promise of calling and of destiny. Where heaven's from creation, His pride and adoration, treasures woven by His love. His careful hands, they hold us safe within His promise of calling and of destiny.
Come on, sing it out together. And I will sing of all you've done, and I'll remember how far you carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful to the end.
A father's heart that's for me, a never-ending story of love that's always chasing me. His kindness overwhelming and hope for me unending. He's never given up on me.
And I will sing, and I will sing now all you've done, and I'll remember how far you carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful to the end, and I will sing now all you've done, and I'll remember how far you carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful to the end, until the end, until the end. You are faithful, God, until the end. There wasn't a day that you were by my side. There wasn't a day that you let me fall. And all of my life, your love has been true. And all of my life, I will worship you. Say, there wasn't a day that you were by my side. There wasn't a day that you let me fall. When all of my life, your love has been true. When all of my life, I will worship you. Oh yes, I will worship you. Come on, right here, right where you are. Oh, we focus our attention on you, God. Give it all, give it all. Let's sing this out together again. One time, say, and I will sing of all you've done, and I'll remember how far you carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful. 'Cause grateful for you, God. Thankful for who you are, what you are in our lives, God. We've seen you prove yourself faithful so many times. We worship you for this, God. Let's sing it out together. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Say, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. Yes. Oh, it's like this. Come on. Right here is where it changes. Come on. We've seen our God prove himself faithful time and again. Amen. Let's sing this out together. I've seen you move the mountains. Say, I've seen you move. You move the mountains. Come on. And I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I together, church. Say, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. Never failed me yet. And I never will forget. Oh, you never fail me yet. No, I never will forget. Oh, you never fail me yet. No, you never fail me yet.
Hey, thanks for singing with us. Every week we like to direct your attention to our digital connection card. This is the best way to get you connected to Next Steps. This is also a great place to introduce yourself, ask any questions that you may have, and also share a prayer request. So you can fill out that digital connection card at salty.org and click connect.
Yeah, and speaking of Next Steps, we have a really awesome one coming up in the fall. It's our Serve event. And one of our core values here at Salty is that salty people serve. And this exciting event, it's really going to be an opportunity for all of us to live that value out together. And like those who currently serve and who are living that value out, or those who are interested in serving, we want to invite everyone to join us at that Serve event. It's happening on Wednesday, August 2nd at the Ormond campus. And Robbie and a few other team members are going to share some vision and encouragement and offer some hands-on training and resources for each of the different types of teams that we have here at Salty. And remember, this is for all those who currently serve, anyone who's serving on a team, as well as those who are interested. So check it out and see what's available and, what would match up with where you would like to serve. Some examples of opportunities are on our guest services team, our Blue Shirts Cafe, students, kids, Salty Family Services, our worship and tech teams, and we want to invite you to join us. It's a super cool event, and I think going to be really awesome for everyone involved. And if you want to sign up, just go to salty.org/events, and we can't wait to see you there. Now we're going to move into our connection time. And each week we take time to connect with God and with each other, continuing in our worship. And if you're new to Salty, we'll put a timer on the screens. It'll be about a minute. In this time, you can connect with others. Maybe write in a comment where you're watching from, who you're watching with, what your name is. We would love to connect with you and for you to be able to connect with other people that are watching online. You can also pray, or if you need prayer and you're watching at salty.org, you can just click the prayer button right below the video and fill out a prayer request. We have a team that individually prays over those requests every Tuesday night. So that's a really awesome opportunity. Or you can participate in communion. That's also something that we do during our connection time. And just remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for you. Whatever you have around the house will work, some crackers and juice. So we'd invite you to do that as well. Or lastly, you can participate with us in your generosity through giving at salty.org/give.
Yeah, and speaking of giving, we want to take this moment and just thank you for your faithful generosity. It's because of your Algo generosity that we're able to celebrate 31 people who got baptized last weekend across all of our campuses. That's incredible. Yes. That's 31 hearts and lives changed thanks to your financial commitment to the Algo initiative and to the mission of Salty to rescue and empower disciples for Jesus. So thank you for partnering with us and helping to make a difference in those 31 lives.
So awesome.
So with that in mind, let's head into our connection time together.
What's up, Salty? Good to see everybody here today. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for joining us online. So glad to see you too. My name is Derek, one of the pastors here at Salty, and we're starting a new series called Summer Stories, and I'm excited about this series. You're going to hear some great stories from the Bible, from real people's lives too. So we're going to jump right in. I want to ask you this question. So here's a question for you. Do you ever feel like life is a battle? You ever feel like life is a battle? I love UFC. I love my wife, I love my family, but I love UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I received some great gifts over the years for Father's Day. Father's Day was 4 weeks ago. You know, some of those gifts I'm talking about, you might have got them too at Father's Day, where you get that card that says, I love you, Daddy, you're the best dad ever, and that's sweet. Or you get that masterpiece finger painting, you know, that they give you. And I have a t-shirt with all my kids' handprints on it, and that's sweet. But the best Father's Day gift I got for 2023 was tickets to the UFC fight in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was amazing. It was absolutely awesome. So let me give you a little sports history in my life, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from. So probably as far back as I can remember, but I'm going to say about at the age of 12 years old, my dad and I used to watch Friday night fights, boxing, on Wild World of Sports. Y'all remember that? Yeah, Friday night fights. I'm talking like Muhammad Ali and George Foreman and Marvelous Marvin Hagler. You remember those? And Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran. I mean, those are some great fights. Went into the 90s with probably one of the greatest boxers that we've ever seen on planet Earth, Mike Tyson. Right? Mike Tyson, man, he was the best. And one of the greatest matches that we've ever seen fought in 1996, Mike Tyson against Evander Holyfield, and it was a battle, and Holyfield wins. They have another fight the following year in 1997. And during this fight in the third round, I don't know what went wrong, but if you remember where you were, Mike Tyson got hungry and took a bite out of Holyfield's ear. Do you remember that? That was crazy. And that fight became known as the Bite Fight. And then, you know, after that fight, when you look back, boxing just kind of tanked. It just kind of went to the way, out the door, it was gone. UFC came into the picture, and about 2001, Dana White bought it and made it what it is today, one of the fastest growing sports that we've seen. And on Father's Day of this past year, I was given 2 tickets to UFC Fight Night in Jacksonville, Florida. And let me tell you what, it was electric. And these are gladiators of our civilization. And everybody's on the edge of their seat. And here's what's interesting about it. There's always a predicted winner, the champion. And there's always a predicted loser, the underdog. But when the underdog connects a punch on the chin of the champion or a kick to the head, everybody goes wild. And on occasion, when the underdog takes down the champion and taps him out with a rear naked chokehold, or he gives him that roundhouse punch on the button on the chin and knocks the champion out, I'm telling you, the crowd stands up and they absolutely go wild. And I saw that happen that night. Do you ever feel like your life is a battle? Your relationships are falling apart. Your health is deteriorating. Your job's kind of maybe a dead-end road. My daughter is going to a new school, a little fearful. She doesn't know anybody. I mean, it seems like too often we find ourselves in a battle where we feel like the underdog. And one of the greatest fights that I want us to talk about today, of all time, took place over 3,000 years ago in 1025 BC in the Valley of Elah. Talked about to this day, this fight was a battle to the death between the champion of the Philistines, Goliath, and David, the underdog, a shepherd boy. And let me give you a little history background about the Valley of Elah. So the Valley of Elah exists to this day. It's in Israel. I had the chance to actually go there 5 years ago and stand there, and it was just ecstatic. And the Valley of Elah runs east and west, and then on the north side there's mountains, and on the south side there's mountains. And the Israelites, God's army, stood to the north, and the Philistines that they were going to battle stood to the south, predicted champions. And it was a standoff, and nothing was taking place. And so the Philistines finally got tired of just sitting around and waiting, and so they send to the valley their champion, Goliath, to call out the Israels. Now, one of the reasons why nobody was moving is because if you actually came down your mountain, went through the valley, and charged up the other mountain, it would just be suicide. And so it was just a standoff until Goliath comes out to call out the Israelites. And this is how big Goliath was and how bad he was. Scripture talks about this. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, we have like the battle scene right here. Verse 4, it says this: Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. Now check this out. He was over 9 feet tall. That's a head shy of a basketball goal. He wore a bronze helmet. He had a bronze coat of mail, weighed 125 pounds. My kids weigh 125 pounds. So he was kind of carrying one of these kids on his body. He also wore bronze leg armor. He carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy as as a weaver's beam. Now, the weaver beam was the beam that ran across when they would weave fabric together. And that big old beam that's holding all the weight, that was his spear, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. And when Goliath came to the middle of the valley of Elah, he would call out the Israel army, "Who's brave enough to fight me to the death? You Israelites are nothing but cowards, and your God is weak." And he would continue to threaten them and throw out these taunts, and no one would answer his call. In fact, 1 Samuel 17:11 says this about the Israeli army. When Saul, who was the king, and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Terrified and deeply shaken of this giant standing in the valley. So I just kind of want us to stop there. Here's another question for you. What are the giants in your life? What are the giants in your life? What giant has you up all night? You can't find sleep. You have no peace. What giant addiction keeps calling your name and taunting you? What giant of brokenness and confusion might you be facing right now? What giant of depression or hopelessness or unemployment? What giant is in your life right now? And here's the thing, none of the Israelites would answer Goliath's call. None of them. Fearful to death this fight would be, except for one person that we're going to talk about. This one young man, David, who was a shepherd boy. He was young, happened to come up on the scene because his dad, Jesse, asked him, as he's out in the field with his sheep, to go feed the soldiers and take his brothers some food. And so that's exactly what he does. He goes out to the mountainside that's on their side where they have the Valley of Elah. He goes out to the soldiers and he starts handing out food, and he finds his brother and starts handing out food to them. And as he does, he hears this giant in the valley throwing taunts and threats at the army. And David is literally shocked at what he hears and what he sees, that all these soldiers are just standing in fear. And it became very clear to him that no one was going to go out and fight Goliath. Everyone was too afraid. And so David says to King Paul simply, "Hey, don't worry about this Philistine. I'll go fight him." Hey, don't worry about this giant out there. I'll take him on and I'll fight him, says the shepherd boy after watching his sheep. The only problem with all that was David wasn't a soldier. He'd never been out on the field. He lacked combat experience. It'd be like me jumping to the octagon to fight one of these champions, and they would carry me out in pieces, literally. I've often seen these guys get hit in the jaw, and I'm thinking, man, that would just separate my head from my body. And here's King Saul's response to David. He said, don't be ridiculous, David. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly even win. You're only a boy. He's been a man of war since his youth. And even David's brothers and the soldiers start to kind of mock David, saying, hey, what are you even doing up here on the battlefield? You belong back with the sheep and the shepherd. Why are you even here? So David just kind of stands there saying, I'll take him on, I'll take him. And everybody taunts him, makes fun of him. And reluctantly, finally, King Saul, Scripture says, agreed to let David fight Goliath. And so I guess he had good intentions with this, but the king gives David his own helmet and this coat of mail. You've seen it before. It's made up of little metal rings put together so a sword might not cut through it. The king gave David his shield and his sword. And David tried it all on. He picked it all up. He took a few steps and just realized, man, this stuff is too big, doesn't fit. I don't feel right in this. It would hinder David from doing what he wanted to do, and that is to fight Goliath. David was more familiar with, more comfortable with, if you will, simply a shepherd's staff and a sling. And so David walked down the mountain with a shepherd's staff and a sling, and he's got closer to the valley. There's a stream running that I've seen. And he stooped over and he picks up these 5 rocks and puts them in a satchel. And as he approaches Goliath from a distance, Goliath looks at him and he mocks him. And he says to him, am I a dog that you come to me with a stick? Come over here and I'll give you the flesh to the birds and the wild animals. And he starts to taunt David. And listen to David's reply. I love his reply. 1 Samuel 17, verse 45 says, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. And today, with confidence, David says, the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you, and I will cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And isn't it interesting? We're standing here talking about this today. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues people, but not with a sword, not with a spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. And after he was finished, David starts to literally run at Goliath. He loads up his sling. He starts to swing it above his head. Goliath picks up his sword. He raises it to the sky. He starts to step towards David. David is now in full sprint, releases the sling, nails Goliath between the eyes, the knockout punch. Goliath falls to the ground, and before Goliath has a chance to even wake up, David takes Goliath's sword from him, stands over his body, and separates his head from his body, and he becomes the victor, the underdog. One of the greatest battles that has ever been spoke of all time, the underdog slays the giants, and the Israelites go wild. Now, let me be honest with you. There's so many takeaways in this story. There's so much good stuff from this story about how you face the giants and how you defeat the giants in your life. And God's going to take this story beyond me, and he's going to speak to you in ways that I'm not going to talk about. But I just want to simply highlight 5 takeaways, maybe for the 5 stones in David's pouch. And here's the first one. There will always be giants to face. Now think about this. I know this doesn't sound really nice, but there will always be giants to face in your life. For David, this wasn't the first giant, and it wasn't the last giant. And if you read through David's autobiography, there were other giants that he faced. For example, after he defeated Goliath, King Saul became jealous of him, chased after him at times to take him out and kill him. As you read through David's life, he has these just family giants of betrayal and incest and relational issues that David faces, and his lust for Bathsheba. This wasn't David's first nor his last fight with giants, and it won't be in your life either, no matter what giant you're facing right now. There will always be giants in your life. So what are you going to do with them? My son Eli's 22 years old. He was born with a kidney condition since birth that he battles, that he has to take care of. Unless God heals him, or there's a cure for this, that will be a giant that he always has to face. Isaiah, my 20-year-old son, aspired to play college football, usually the fastest player on the field when he played, born with speed. But all throughout middle school and high school, he had these unforeseen injuries that always take him down, those giants in his life. And as of 2 years ago, he had an opportunity to meet his birth brother that he never met before. But his birth brother was murdered before he ever had a chance to meet him. There will always be giants that you face. Sammy, my 10-year-old son, and some of you know this, was born with, 5 years old, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It's a daily battle of life and death. He has to take care of it. He has to take insulin every time he eats or drinks. If he doesn't, he will die. And until there's a cure, he will fight that giant. There will always be giants in your life that you got to face. And one of the ways to defeat the giants that we learn from this story of David is this. Listen, start listening to God and stop listening to the sideline noise in your life. Start listening to God. If David would have listened to all the sideline noise, he would have never entered into the valley of Elah. He would have never defeated Goliath. He would have walked away from the battlefield, literally defeated, back to a sheep, probably kicking dirt and rocks all the way, beating himself up. And sometimes the giants in your life seem to get the upper hand because you spend too much time listening to their voices. Because you know this as well as I do. There's always people on the sidelines telling you that you're no good, and you can't do that, and you'll never amount to anything, and you don't have the skills to, and you're too old now, and your faith isn't real, and God is too weak. And all those voices come at you, and they start to reside in your head, and we literally take them to bed at night, and they never shut up unless you put them to sleep. Start listening to God and not the naysayers in your life. That's why it's so critical, no matter where you are in your faith journey, it's so critical to know the words of Christ, to know how God looks at you and how much he loves you and he cares for you and he gives you hope. It's critical that you know that. Like he says about you, if God is for you, who can be against you? He says about you that you are more than a conqueror in Christ Jesus. Stop listening to the voices on the sidelines and start listening to God no matter where you are in your situation. Here's what's interesting. 100% of the Israeli army thought that facing Goliath meant death. And 100% got that wrong. Start listening to God. Stop listening to the voices around you. Know who God is and who you are in Christ. The third thing I think we can gather from this story is this: giants are not always as strong as you think. Now think about that for a minute. Giants are not always as strong as you think. Remember the old saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall? You know, it didn't matter to David that Goliath was 9 feet tall, weighed probably over 500 pounds. Didn't matter to him. Because David knew the moment that he stepped out on that battlefield that he had the upper hand, that he had the advantage. Giants are not always as strong as you think. See, David knew that he had a sling. Goliath had a sword. David, with a sling, was a marksman shooter at 10, 20, 30, 40 yards. And Goliath was a hand-to-hand combat warrior. It's kind of like the old saying, you brought a knife to a gunfight. And that's why he was able to take Goliath down. And the giant that you're facing in your life is no surprise to God. And I guarantee you that God looks at your giant differently than the way you probably look at your giant. And again, I don't know what your giant is, but God knows what your giant is. And you might need to just take a step back, look at it at a couple 100 feet, 200 feet above it, and start to see it the way God sees it. Whether it's your situation at work, or a sickness, or an uncertain future, or a broken relationship, the giant in your life is not as strong as you think. Two more that I want to take away. Sometimes, listen to this, and this doesn't feel good, but I got to say this. Sometimes you have to face your giant alone. Now think about that for a moment. Sounds hard, it doesn't feel good, but it's the truth, and let me explain this. David was the only one, check this out now. David was the only one to walk out into the valley of Elah. And when he walked out alone. He faced the giant alone, except for this was the difference. He knew God was with him, right? He walked out there alone. The army was behind him, safe and sound. He was the one putting his life on the line. He knew that God was with him. Might be the reason why he wrote this. Think about it in Psalms 23, verse 4. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid. For you are close beside me, your rod and staff protect and comfort me. Whatever valley you're walking through, however dark it starts to get, however alone you feel, in your room or parked at the beach in your car, know that God is with you. Acknowledge God. Speak to God. Depend on God like David did. One of the hardest parts of walking with Christ is this. Now hold on to this. I can't walk with Christ for you. You can't walk with Christ for me. I have to walk in my relationship with Christ, and sometimes I feel alone, just like you do. But sometimes when you walk alone, there's faith and there's courage found in the middle of your situation and of your valley that's greater than your fear and doubt. And you start to realize that God is with you. And here's the last one I want to give you. Take this home with you. God is greater than any giant. Listen to that now. God is greater than any giant. Just say that with me. God is greater than any giant. If it was not true, I would not be standing right here in front of you today. Let me tell you why. Because the giants show up at every part of my life. When I made the dumbest mistake that I probably ever made and was arrested at 18 for grand theft and sentenced to 2 years of prison, the giant in my life said, "You're doomed." And I have to tell you, I found peace. I discovered peace when I was in prison. And I realized that God was greater than any giant. And when I tried to register for college, being an ex-convict, the giant showed up one more time and said, no, you're not going to be able to enroll because you're an ex-convict. And I had to go to battle, and I had to meet with the administrator, and I had to sit there and talk to him. I had to kind of prove myself, if you will, because they don't want to accept an ex-con. But God was greater, and 4 years later, I had my degree. And when I surrendered to ministry during that time, sure enough, the giant showed up again. And they said, God won't use you. God can't use you. But God was greater 27 years later in ministry. The giant showed up and said, you're not fit to be a dad. When I had to sit before an adoption board and prove myself worthy enough because of my background. But God was greater, and 6 kids later. I'm telling you, God is greater than any giant that you'll ever face. And the giants, and you know this, they've showed up at the hardest and the darkest and the most difficult times of my life, but God has been greater than any giant in my life, and God will be greater than any giant that you face in your life. And I want to leave you with this. Before we go in our reflection time, I just want to read this passage to you. Ephesians 6:11-13 says this, put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. And therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. And then, after the battle, you will still be standing firm. Standing firm. Don't be afraid of the giant in your life. God is greater. God is greater. So at the end of our time together, we have a reflection time, and I just want to ask you these 2 questions and give you about 90 seconds to think about this. And you can talk to him or you want to, or you can just talk to God. But just simply this, what are the giants in your life right now? What are the giants in your life? And what will you do differently in the battle when facing your giants? Take about 90 seconds. I'll come back out, close this up.
What an incredible message we heard today. Hey, thanks for joining us again here at Salty Online. We want to wish you guys a very happy week, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
All right, that worked.